Elena Marchetti had spent $480,000 across 8 frustrating days trying to get one car running again, and it took a delivery driver in a battered work jacket exactly 14 minutes to finish the job specialists couldn't touch. She'd built a nearly $500 million company before turning 30, could summon private jets on 90 minutes notice, and had 2 acquisition offers waiting and signed on her desk, yet the one thing she wanted most eluded her, the sound of her Bugatti Chiron's engine turning over. Standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Denver headquarters 41 stories up, she'd already burned through 6 credentialed specialists, the last a German consultant from a Stuttgart firm charging $4,000 an hour, who'd left with dignified excuses and her money but no answer, prompting her muttered, "Unbelievable," that her assistant Sanaa overheard anyway. That Thursday, delivery driver Nathaniel Cross dropped his daughter Josie at school, loaded his aging Ford Transit van, and set out on a routine parts run that went sideways when a wrong digit on his delivery slip sent him toward the wrong entrance. A mechanical mix-up with a lowering barrier arm forced him into Elena's private underground garage instead of the commercial dock. There, surrounded by a midnight blue Ferrari, a covered vintage Aston Martin, and other quiet luxury, he spotted the Chiron under bright lights, its aftermarket brake ducts and specification details instantly readable to him in a way that startled even himself. Left briefly alone near an abandoned diagnostic cart showing a stubborn fault code, he recognized something the professionals had missed, an undocumented mid-production grounding harness change he happened to know intimately, because years earlier, before fatherhood and grief reshaped his life, he'd been an engineer at Bugatti's Molsheim development facility. When Elena arrived and found a stranger in work boots beside her prized car, her exhaustion sharpened into suspicion, but his precise question about the exact fault code cut through her defenses. Skeptical yet desperate, she let him try. Working with a borrowed creeper and pry tool, crouching beside him instead of watching from a distance, she listened as he traced a loose grounding lug behind the rear suspension, the exact vulnerability of that model year. 11 minutes later, the Chiron roared back to life, and something unguarded crossed her face as she sat behind the wheel. Learning of his background, she offered him a paid consulting role, 3 flexible days a week, structured firmly around his daughter's school schedule, which he insisted on protecting without compromise. She agreed instantly, sensing in him a rare quality, expertise without performance. That evening, Josie, sharp and perceptive for 8, extracted the story from her father in fragments, delighted to hear about the Bugatti and the new job, and reminded him gently that his old delivery van still made that noise. Nathaniel began working alongside the small fleet team, veteran technician Desmond, quick-witted apprentice Talia, and parts coordinator Felix, earning quiet respect for knowledge that outmatched even Desmond's decades of experience. Elena started appearing in the workshop without explanation, watching him work the way she'd crouched by the Chiron, genuinely present rather than performing executive oversight. Their rapport deepened through small professional moments, his insight resolving a manufacturing calibration issue, his blunt honesty contrasted against consultants who reframed problems instead of solving them. Invited to a supplier dinner, Nathaniel negotiated his attendance around Josie's diorama project, and Elena promised to end the evening early, keeping her word. At the dinner, a private rooftop moment revealed cracks in her polished exterior, an unspent smile, an admission that she wasn't sure Denver was still the right choice for her life, and a wistful comment about wanting to notice more, which he recognized as uncharacteristically honest. Their Saturday morning routine began almost accidentally, coffee and breakfast sandwiches turning into confessions, his late wife Renee, loud and opinionated, gone 2 years after Josie's birth, Elena's admission she'd never sacrificed anything significant for another person. When newly arrived Molsheim replacement parts revealed a factory service bulletin confirming the very flaw Nathaniel had diagnosed, his lack of resentment toward his old employer contrasted sharply with Elena's cynicism about her own company's instinct to protect itself legally rather than fix problems outright. Their bond deepened further when Elena, uneasy about a looming minority stake acquisition from Vantage Capital Partners led by the smooth, over-prepared Damon Rourke, brought her doubts to Nathaniel in the garage. He spotted immediately what her enthusiastic board had missed, an escalation clause disguised as boilerplate that would let Vantage seize controlling interest at a locked-in, deeply discounted price if the company's valuation crossed a certain threshold within 5 years. Encouraged to trust her own read of the situation rather than the room's momentum, Elena ordered her legal team to model the valuation trajectory. Meanwhile, the relationship expanded naturally into family life, an impromptu visit to the city's Highline observation tower with Josie, who instantly warmed to Elena, borrowing her jacket and declaring herself a detective, and Elena's genuine, surprised laughter at the child's remarks. By December, Josie began asking whether breakfast Saturday was happening as a matter of course, and Elena started visiting the garage on days with no business reason at all, once confiding to Nathaniel amid engine work that she needed to think aloud to someone outside her company's chain of command. The attorney's analysis confirmed his suspicion. At current growth, the escalation trigger would activate in 31 months, handing Vantage control at a 40% discount. Elena called an emergency board meeting, prepared to withdraw from the deal despite resistance from directors with ties to Rourke. She phoned Nathaniel with the news on December 23, then, with Josie away at her grandmother's, accepted his offer of company during year-end shop inventory, the two of them later sharing coffee and family history in an all-night diner, her chaotic Louisville upbringing, his father's old garage and the moment at 12 when he diagnosed a stuck carburetor float that no one else could find, a gift his father recognized and nurtured before dying while Nathaniel was still in France. On January 3, the board voted 7-2 to withdraw from the Vantage discussions after Rourke, calling her judgment hysterical, on a call her board chair Devon Park put on speaker, undermined himself in front of the very people he needed. Elena admitted afterward, voice raw with fatigue, that she'd nearly caved under the room's pressure and that Nathaniel's plainly stated warning, that escalation trigger is the whole point, was what she held on to. She took a rare week off, and when Josie casually suggested inviting her to a weeknight pasta dinner, Elena arrived early with almond cookies and wine, settling into the ordinary rhythm of the household with an ease that surprised even her, later washing dishes at Nathaniel's sink without being asked. On the front step that night, she admitted plainly that something had shifted in her and that she wasn't sure how to navigate a relationship this real, while Nathaniel, who'd spent months deliberately not moving in any direction out of respect for Josie's stability and his own grief, admitted the same thing had happened to him. They agreed, carefully, to find out together what it meant. By February, the Vantage matter closed quietly, Rourke's firm citing portfolio priorities in a bland public statement while everyone who mattered understood what had really happened. The restored Chiron ran perfectly, and on a cold test drive Elena handled the machine with the same instinct and attentiveness Nathaniel recognized from his own trade, prompting him to note that her business instincts were really just 20,000 hours of pattern recognition dressed up as intuition. In March, Nathaniel raised the subject of his late wife directly, making clear that loving Elena wasn't a revision of what he'd had with Renee, and that Josie's needs would always come first. Elena, in turn, admitted she didn't fully know how to build a life this grounded but wanted to try anyway. The story closes not with grand spectacle but with an ordinary April Saturday at the shop, bay door open to the year's first real warmth, Josie sketching on a rolling stool while Elena, coffee in hand, listened intently to an 8-year-old's theories about negative space and pie crusts, and Nathaniel, wiping grease from his hands, understood that this unplanned, imperfect, deeply real thing between them was not a replacement for what he'd lost but a continuation of a life that kept moving forward regardless. A wrong address, a lowering barrier arm, and one overlooked grounding fault had set it all into motion, and rather than dwell on how easily none of it might have happened, the three of them simply gathered themselves and went to get lunch at their diner, a small unremarkable moment that, in the end, was everything.